Hey everyone, this is WobblyWallaby. With the job change voucher being earnable in-game for free, which class should you choose for farming and why? Farming is one of the most vital parts of this game, so it's an important decision to make. Today, I'll be going over my farming tier list and explain why certain classes are ranked that way, and give some warnings for certain classes as people may not be aware of some of the steep requirements to use that class. Which class do you think will be at the top? Stay tuned to find out. Before I begin, there are a few things to mention. First, this game has a lot of flexibility when it comes to farming. This list covers some popular farming techniques I've seen for all the classes. If you have some other farming strategy for a certain class or some secret farming technique, leave a comment and I can try it out to see if it'll affect the tier list. Second, there are a lot of classes to cover, so I'll be going through some classes very briefly. If you have any questions about the builds, leave a comment and I'll try my best to answer it, and maybe cover some of these in future farming videos. Third, this tier list will cover the technique to create low-level alts to farm on your account. This is a common practice. There are level penalties in the game, as you can see here. Thanks to my friend Mig for posting this on Reddit. From this chart, you can see it's optimal to stay within 30 levels of your target, that way you get 100% loot. People create alts to take advantage of great farming spots in the game, where there are often fast spawning, high density, and fixed spawn locations. Unfortunately, a lot of late game maps took these away, so low-level maps have these advantages. People will pass their main gear over to their alts so they become super strong early on. Personally, I don't do low-level alts because I'm too lazy to delete and recreate characters once they pass a certain level threshold. I also don't want to buy an extra premium for my alt just to do farming more efficiently. When premiums used to be cheaper on the exchange, I feel this was more viable. Instead, I do the farming technique, which is late game farming. I choose a class that farms optimally on the new maps, where fixed spawns are rare and the density and spawn rates are lower. Lastly, for many farming videos out there, they assume you have the One-Eyed Captain or Ashy Star Flying Feather. These two gachas give you nearly unlimited SP because you get SP per kill and temporarily increase your move speed by 30%. So it's highly recommended for farming to avoid eating foods for SP discharge. If you don't have these, your results may vary. One-Eyed Captain is still available in the Time Wish machine right now, so get it before it disappears. If you do plan on getting gachas for farming and want to save money, try out Smile.1, which allows you to get discounted PCC and premiums for Ragnarok Mobile. They are an official business partner with Ragnarok Mobile and have been around for more than 8 years. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check them out. Thanks to Smile.1 for sponsoring this video. Next, I'll give my thoughts on each class that can be purchasable, which means event classes like Saitama and Slayer are excluded. At the end of the video, I'll put the summary with all the classes on the tier list. For S tier, I'd consider these classes which feel unfair and people have often complained about, and has a huge advantage over other classes in farming. For A tier, these are classes that can efficiently kill multiple enemies at once, but tend not to have as high earnings as an S tier class. For B tier, these are classes that can kill multiple enemies at once, but the kill rate isn't as good as A tier. For C tier, these are classes that can kill multiple enemies at once, but it's quite situational, so the consistency is worse than B tier. These are often classes that have AoE skills, but it's more of a meme to use them for farming. For D tier, these are classes that are horrible at farming. You might as well run instances to use up your combat time instead. I'll first begin with Spirit Whisperer. I would consider this A tier. It has good AoE skills that you can get early on, and your Lunatic Gunner is also great for getting some extra kills. It's also very easy for newbies since you can get high damage, and this AoE can be convertible. The ease of use is what makes this A tier instead of B tier. However, it does have cooldown which is quite high, and the map density on newer maps aren't quite ideal either. Next is Ruin Master. I would consider this B tier. For farming, there are 3 breaths that have good AoE, which you can also put on auto. It is high damage, and if you have Abyssal Arrival, you can also kill multiple monsters at once in an area. However, the skill cooldown is a bit high, and the map density on the newer maps aren't quite ideal for this strategy. Next is Thanatos. I would consider this C tier. His skills are quite slow, which is why I don't consider this very good. If you do have his maximum core skills and you're able to have the Donut of Death, then it can be pretty funny for farming. However, as cool as it is to wipe out all those monsters at once, the maps just don't have a high enough spawn rate to support this. If it was near instant, this would be so overpowered. However, that's not the reality, so this is the C tier. Next is Divine Avenger. I would consider this C tier. It's definitely not good at farming, but a funny strategy to use is the Shield of Judex for the cooldown reset. The AoE is kinda small, so this is more of a meme build than anything else. Next is Arcane Master. I would consider this A tier. It is really good early game farming using Meteor Storm on densely populated maps with fixed spawn locations. This is great for alt accounts and you'll often see them in Glass Helm culverts. As you go higher level, you can also use Chain Lightning, and it is a fantastic skill for hitting 7 targets, and the monsters can also be hit a bit farther away from each other. However, late game, the maps lack density and fixed spawn rates to take advantage of these skills, so unfortunately, it's not as great. My rating of A is heavily dependent on using this as an alt. Next is Chronomancer. I would consider this D tier. People have attempted an auto attack build for this, but I still find AoE is a lot better, and the auto attack build can only be used on low level maps as well. Next is Blade Soul. I consider this C tier. For alt farming, you can use Poisonous Smoke in Glass Helm culverts, which is pretty good. However, for people that are using this, they're often doing it manually, so it's not very good for many people. For late game, the best option is to do the auto attack and soul depravity build in the Komodo maps, like Frost Valley. Sometimes these maps lack density, so it's not as effective. Also, you need to run up to the creatures to hit it, so being melee really sucks compared to ranged. Next is Phantom Dancer. I consider this A tier. Your passive gives you a higher drop rate, and you're also able to get extra zenny through its auto attack. You also have multiple good AoE options, which stick on the ground, so it's very ideal for fixed spawn monsters. Some examples where you can use this are the Kobold Forest or Ghost Ship. You can even plagiarize Storm Gust to deal even more damage to these monsters. However, you also need to be on a server where you can get rid of these drops quickly, otherwise your income is going to be bad since the raw zenny here may be lower than other maps. Unfortunately, you can deal with low level monsters very well, but it's not good for late game maps, so this is more of an alt character. Next is Stellar Hunter. This is S tier, but that's no surprise. This is the class I use, and it is my favorite farming style. It's good because the AoE from Meteor Fission can hit multiple targets who aren't spawning at fixed spots, so there's lots of flexibility on your maps. You also have fast move speed since you're able to mount your warg that gives you 25% extra move speed. And you also have very high attack rate. Unfortunately, without the One-Eyed Captain or Ashy gacha, your move speed and SP regen will be lower. For high-end maps, one-shotting with the Meteor Fission can also be difficult. For my free-to-play account, I did have to spend quite a bit of time to one-shot things, but it's fun to go to lower-end maps if you're not capable of the late-game maps. Also, before you get to Stellar Hunter, if you're farming from earlier jobs, it's going to be horrible. It won't farm well until you are the 4th job. Another huge problem is the server lag issue that can cause double hits to occur. So without offline battle, you may be less efficient as well. If you want more information about server lag and how it affects your farming, see this video's link in the description. Next is Solar and Luna. I would consider the C tier, as Severe Rainstorm is pretty good, but it heavily relies on fixed spawn spots, which is rare for late game maps. For early game maps, I'd honestly just use other classes which are stronger at farming. Next is Saint. This is A tier. This is great for hitting lower level mobs with the Shadow Wave skill. Once you go to late game maps, this will be a lot harder to kill, so this is why it's bad. This is best used in alts, and you can use Shadow Wave to very efficiently farm 5 enemies at once. This is often used in Glass Helm Culverts and Cobalt Forest. Next is Dragon Fist. This is D tier. It's horrible at farming, so just do Rifts instead. Next is Lightbringer. This is A tier. It has great passes for earning more Zenny and drops. Also, it has high damaging skills that makes it very free to play friendly. It is much easier than Stellar Hunter to one-shot things. You can also get the Pioneer to help you farm, so you get some extra kills from your robot buddy. This is a great class from early to late game for farming. Also, some people will have the Mistress Star card to make Arm Cannon not cost any shells. One thing that I do get annoyed about this is when I use Arm Cannon and I only hit one monster, and it feels like I'm throwing my Zenny on these shells. If you had the Mistress Star card, it would definitely push Lightbringer closer to the S tier. Next is Begetter. This is S tier. It's great for lower level maps with alts. This is one of the best farmers in the game, and also one of the most controversial ones. I believe it hit the peak back when Plains of Ida was released. After that, it lost its popularity since the high-end maps were less dense and the fixed spawn locations disappeared. Komodo has a few, but it's not as optimal. This class is controversial because of the manual farming, which does a lot better since the auto Hell Plants and Demonic Fire is very suboptimal. You'll often see it in the wrong locations, and if you did it manually, it'd be much better. Also, the Mistress Star card makes this much better since the Hell Plants will be free. Otherwise, you're shelling a Zenny for each Hell Plant, which can get kind of annoying. Before you build an alt, I would warn you to check Plains of Ida, Border Checkpoint, Glass Helm Culverts, and Cobalt Forest to make sure these maps have free space for it. If it's constantly full, then you won't be able to play this anyways. These maps do not have mirrors, so they could get very full and very hard to farm. Next is Soulbinder. I'd consider this B tier. It has great AoE that's similar to Arcane Master, and it's great for low maps as well, but not for late game maps. However, I think Arcane Master is still better for farming early game maps. That is why I would consider this B tier. Next is Apocalypse. This is D tier. It's terrible at farming. Its AoE also requires you to be close to monsters. Next is Novice Guardian. This is D tier. Card Attack and Card Tornado is pretty slow. You could attempt the Thunderbolt build as well, but honestly I think you should just use another class to farm. Next is Yamata. This is A tier. For low level maps, I find that it does very well with magic, such as in Glass Helm Culverts and Cobalt Forest. This is the ideal for low level alts. For late game, the auto attack physical build is quite amazing. I learned about this build from Fatty Sand, and I'll put a link to his video. This works very well in Komodo, but not on the hunting ground maps. It's also very flashy. You're able to get a kill rate that's close to Stellar Hunter. Next is Tyrant. This is S tier. This may be considered the best farming class in the game, but it comes with a ton of requirements and conditions. First, unlike Stellar Hunter, your AoE is not guaranteed. You must get the third line Flightfire Ruin with 75% or higher first line. Otherwise, your kill rate will be roughly the same as a Stellar Hunter, so you might as well use a Stellar Hunter instead. Second, this class has very high requirements for late game maps. For your Flightfire Ruin, your missiles aren't auto attack, so you need to ignore defense and skill damage. As a result, you need to balance out both instead of just focusing on auto attack damage. You may need to heavily rely on MVP and mini cards, and also have very high end gear to pull this off. Things are much easier if you make a Gunslinger alt and farm low level maps instead, as the requirements to one-shot things is much lower. Also, on low level maps with fixed spawn locations, you can also switch to the pistol instead since you don't need the range of the rifle. Third, you can get extra range from 3 ways. You get +1 range from using the sniper coat. I find this worse than ancient equipment like the voodoo armor, so you're going to be giving up a lot of things like ignore defense for the extra range. Also, the God Rifle gives you +3 meters, but this relies on your guild having it. Finally, there's a manual method using Eagle Eye, which is unfortunately that you can't put this on auto. This will give you an enormous range, which is basically full screen. So when you see Gunslinger results from other people, you should definitely ask if they use any of these range boosting methods, as this can cause a huge difference in Zenny. Also, keep in mind Stealth Hunters can be mounted on their work for plus 25% move speed, so the extra range is one way to make up for your lower move speed. Finally, I put all these results together into this tier list. Let me know what you think and whether you think certain classes should be at a different tier or not. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe.